Welcome to this virtual meeting of full council. It's 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 18th of February 2021. My name is Councillor Linda Eaton and I am the Mayor and Chair of this meeting. And my fellow councillor, Councillor Lily Kaufman, is the Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio-visual recording will also be made available on the Council's website and YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of their device microphone at all times. A reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode, and those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. For the purpose of recording of attendance, I can confirm that the following members are present and participating in this remote meeting: Councillor Rosemary Adams, Councillor Naveed Alam, Councillor Lee Bentley, Councillor Bill Bolter, Councillor John Boyce, Leader of the Council, Councillor Linda Broadley, Councillor Frank Broadley, Councillor David Carter, Councillor Michael Charlesworth, the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Lateef Dar, myself, Councillor Robert Eaton, Councillor Dean Gamble, Councillor Kamal Katoria, who's the Leader of the Opposition, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Samir Hack, Councillor Priti Joshi, who is the Leader of the Opposition, Lily Kaufman, Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman, Councillor Amnandeep Kaur, Councillor Claire Kozlowski, Councillor David Lloydell, Councillor Kevin Lloydell, Councillor Sharon Morris and Councillor Ian Ridley. We also have the following officers in attendance: Samuel Ball, trainee solicitor who is acting as a Democratic Services Officer, Comrie Campbell, Head of Finance, Anne Court, Chief Executive and Head of Paid Services, Philippa Fisher, Head of Customer Service and Transformation, Stephen Hines, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer, Adrian Thorpe, Head of Built Environment, and Stephen Tucker, Democratic and Electoral Services Manager. For the purposes of the regulations, that I can confirm that before this remote meeting went live, all participants confirmed that they can see and or hear all other participants. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote meeting procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the Council's proper conduct of its business. Thank you. Before proceeding to the business on tonight's agenda, I would ask that everyone joins me to observe a minute's silence in memory of both the late former councillor, Mr. Jim Allen, who sadly passed away on the 21st of January 2021, and the late former officer, Mr. Jez Crooks, who sadly passed away on the 16th of January 2021. Thank you, everybody. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've received apologies this evening from councillors Helen Lloydall and Richard Morris. And just for the record, the monitoring officer, Mr. Gill, has joined the meeting now.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Unless members have any comments or objections, may the minutes be approved and signed by general affirmation. Thank you. Agenda item 5, action list arising from the previous meeting. There was no action list arising from the previous meeting. Agenda item 6, motions on notice.
None received, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agenda item 7, petitions, deputations and questions.
None received, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, Mayor's announcements. All civic engagements undertaken by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor in person have been suspended during the COVID pandemic. We're going now to agenda item 10, council tax setting. Can I ask Councillor Dean Gamble, Chair of PFD, to introduce the report?
Apologies, Your Worship. I believe
Sorry,
Dean Gamble, Chair of the PFD, will introduce agenda item 11. I do apologise.
Not 10, sorry. So who's going to do agenda item 10?
If you don't mind, Your Worship, Comey Campbell had the delight of writing this report, and he presented it to the members tonight. And for those who haven't met Comey, Comey is the Deputy 151. He's been with us for about 8 months now, and this is his first council meeting, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, would you like to go ahead and introduce the item?
Yes, certainly. The purpose of this report is to set and approve the council tax under the Local Government Act legislation 1992. So in this report, in the recommendations, I've outlined what the actual council tax base is for Alderby, which is 17,558.7 properties. So basically that is the number of properties that we are expecting to collect council tax from. And in further down in the report, if you go to section B, in recommendation B, it's got a figure of 4,117,515. This is the amounts of money expected to be collected from the council tax for 21-22. And then section C, it outlines a figure of 34,464, which is basically the total amount of council tax the council will be collecting on behalf of the precepts. So that's the county council, the police authority and the fire authority. And then the next figure down, the 30 million, is less the 4 million that the council will collect for itself. And then the actual, if you go in section C, item 4, it shows what the actual, it shows a figure of £234.50. This is the element of the council tax that actually relates to Alderby and Wigston. And this is the element they will keep. So that will be the Band D amount that's the Band D element that relates to Alderby and Wigston, but it's not the total council tax payable. So in the recommendations section, it outlines what the elements of the council tax are for the preceptors, and it's got Alderby and Wigston, which is outlined, and as I said before, the Band D element is 234.50, and then it's got Leicestershire County Council, and it outlines what their elements are of the council tax, and their element of the Band D is £1,410.78, and then it outlines what the police and crime commissioner for Leicester and Leicestershire's element of the council tax comprises of. And then it goes on to the fire authority. And then at the item E in the recommendations, it shows what the total council tax would be. So for instance, Band D for Alderby and Wigston resident would be £1,962.80. And then it shows what the amounts would be for the other bandings, like Band A would be £1,308.53 up to Band H, which would be £3,925.60. So if I then go to item 1.2 of the report, it shows what the percentage increase is for each of the preceptors of their element of the council tax. So Leicester County Council element is 4.99% increase, which is basically 1.99% increase in the council tax, and then an additional 3% precept on top of that for adult social care. And then you've got the police and crime commissioners, whose element of the council tax is increased by 6.43%. And then you've got the fire authority's element of the council tax is increased by 1.96%. So if you go down to 1.6, it shows what the Band D of the council tax comprises of. So you've got each of the different elements of it. So you've got the county council, which I mentioned before is £1,410.78. And then if you keep on going down, you see that the total council tax chargeable at a Band D is £1,962.80. So overall, it's a 4.72% increase in the council tax from the previous financial year 2021. And on the back page, it's just a pie chart that highlights what percentage of the council tax relates to each authority. So for instance, Alderby and Wigston's amount of £234.50 is 12% of the overall council tax bill, where the majority of the council tax bill relates to the county. And then then you also can see what the elements are for the other preceptors, the police and the fire service. So that's the council tax report. So it's the recommendation I'm putting forward is for the council tax to be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Hack.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question regarding the increase by the police and the crime commissioner. I know previously when the council tax was increased, the police used to come to Oadby Forum or Wigston Forum and South Wigston Forum to present or do a presentation to say why they're increasing what they're increasing. Now that we don't have that, is there a statement from them that what are the reasons behind? Because as a collecting authority, I think we will receive the flack from the public that why is it such a high increase? So is there a statement from them to go in our letterbox or anything? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Campbell, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, they've based their increase. They've got a committee report that they've obviously reported to their members, based on the reasons why, outlining the reasons why they want the increase. They need the increase for additional costs they have to incur, and as part of their budget calculations, that's how they arrived at this figure. I haven't got the detailed report in front of me, but it outlines the reasons how they can balance their budget, and part of it was increasing council tax, their element of the council tax, by that amount.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Bill Bolter, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor, and good evening to you. And hello, Mr. Campbell. We haven't met before, so not surprised you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for doing the pie chart. I should put in there, and That's very good. To me, that's the best way of it, describing to residents who has what amount of the budget they're paying. And you can see from this the tremendous amount that the county council takes out of the budget. And if you look very carefully, you see that the police now charge the ratepayers more than Oadby and Wixton. So, first time ever, the police precept is bigger than Oadby and Wixton's precept. Which what's going to happen next year, I don't know, because it was £15 increase across the board this year by the police. And there is a reason for that, which will come out in, I'm sure, in some form or other for the council to have a look at. But I mean, all this is about pushing the burden of tax onto the ratepayers rather than central government, where really it ought to belong. I mean, we've got no rate support grant anymore, that we used to have. Various other government funding used to come to us. That no longer comes to us. So, you know, they keep withdrawing all the ways we can raise money. I mean, we made money out of the recycling. The county council took that away from us. So that's another thing we're lost out on for no fault of our own. All these things add up over the years. But the budget is before us by Mr. Campbell, and I'm prepared to accept that. Working the way through it, I'm quite happy with that as the best we can at the present time. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Mr. Campbell, do you want to come back and reply? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, fine. That's we have yeah. So we've shown it in pie chart just to highlight what percentage each element of the council tax relates to, and yes, the police authority have increased theirs by quite a large percentage. I think they've outlined it in their budget report, but that's all I can say on the matter at the moment. But thank you for the comments I've received from the council.
Thank you. Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, all. My understanding is that if Oadby and Wixton wanted to put their council tax up beyond £5, which we'll be talking about, we would have to hold a referendum. Does that not same thing apply to the police? They've put it beyond whatever limit it is the government have decided is needed. It's not a criticism of police. I'm asking actually for a factual reply, because I understand why it's gone up, because Leicestershire's been dramatically underfunded for years. And not only that, it's not only COVID and things like that have caused problems for all the authorities. It's basically 10 years of gross underfunding of local government. And they've been very clever, the government. They take the money away from us. So we've got to put the council tax up. And we get the blame, but it's the government that's taken away. So actually my question is, does not the law require a referendum because they have put up their council tax so much? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
I probably can't
come back.
Yeah, I probably can't really answer that question. I don't know what the rules are regarding the police authority. Yes, if it was this council, yes, you're right what you're saying, but I'm not quite sure what the rules are around the police authority. But I can find out.
Thank you. Mr. Hines wants to speak now. Councillor Kevin Lloyd. I'll call him first, and I'll call you if you're okay with that. Is that all right? Thank you. Mr. Hines, please. You need to unmute. You need to unmute.
Sorry, no, hopefully I'll just repeat that. Hopefully I can shed a little bit of light on this, and hopefully not taking any of Councillor Lloyd's thunder. The £15 is within the remit that the police authority is allowed to set it at. We all have different levels of setting. So if the police had gone above their level, then they would have had to potentially had to carry out a consultation. If we'd have gone above £5, we would have, but they're within their limits. We're within our limits. Nobody's gone above their authorised threshold.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Lloyd, please.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Just to clarify the Police and Crime Commissioner's report, as Mr. Irons has reported, that there is a paragraph in the Police and Crime Panel's budget setting that they spoke to the Home Office and they got permission to raise it by the maximum amount of to £15. Anything over that, they would have invoked a referendum. But it's important to remember that, like all local authorities, is that from a police point of view, I support the police obviously and sit on that panel, that the cost, as it's already been alluded to, is now being passed further and further down the ladder to the actual local taxpayer. For example, we used to have a 70-30 split, hadn't we? As people remember, from a 70% central funding and 30% collected locally. What's happened here with the police precept is that it now stands at 58% centrally funded and 42% now levied at the local taxpayer. Hence the reason it keeps going up each year, because the national funding is being receded year on year. So they do have a particular problem. I'm not defending it. The government keeps giving just year on year budgets rather than a prolonged 3-year budget so you can plan. For example, last year they gave it went up by £10, and that would allow 89 new police officers, but their pay was for 1 year only. The money that's been given this year by central government is actually to continue to pay those 89 police officers because it wasn't in the budget, so they've had to roll it over to this year. They have. So it's like everything else, is that from a central point of view, it's been loaded down to the local taxpayer to pick up the bill more and more, and that's why it keeps going up. Just for a matter of record, over the last 2 or 3 years, the local taxpayer is now funding 257 new police officers and 20 PCSOs. Central governments are only funding 89 police officers. So by the end of 2023, this police authority should have an extra 257 and plus 89. So the main burden of cost is to the local taxpayer and not central government. So we've got a police and crime panel election coming up. So if anybody puts in there that they're saying that the government meets the target, I can give you word for word and evidence-based information how we arrived at these figures. So let's make sure that people out there know the 20,000 promised, we are paying for that, not central government. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Councillor John Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I echo the words of my predecessors on this. The simple fact is that the government is continually forcing costs down, especially on the district councils. They're also completely underfunding us by simply not giving us anything at all. Unfortunately, we are where we are, and I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Gamble, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations have been moved by Councillor Boyce and seconded by Councillor Gamble. In accordance with Rule 18.3.2 of Part 4 of the Constitution, as required by Regulation 4 and Part 3 of Schedule 2 of the Local Authorities Standing Orders England Regulations 2001, as amended, the names of the members who cast a vote for this motion or against this motion or who abstain from voting will be recorded for this item of particular business and will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting's proceedings. A recorded vote will now be taken by Democratic Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. So could we start with Councillor Adams, please?
Agree.
Councillor Allen?
4.
Councillor Bentley,
For.
Councillor Bolter,
For.
Councillor Boyce,
For.
Councillor Frank Broadley,
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley,
For.
Councillor Carter,
For.
Councillor Charlesworth,
For.
Councillor Dar,
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton,
For.
Councillor Robert Eaton,
For.
Councillor Gamble,
For.
Councillor Gattaraya,
I don't think he can hear you. Where is he? I can't see him.
is that a raised hand voting in favour? Just nod if.
Councillor Gattaraya, you're muted. Can you unmute, please, and answer? Thank you. No. If you can't do that, if you're for it, can you raise your hand, please?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. There you go, Miss Hines.
You, Councillor Hack,
For.
Councillor Joshi,
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman,
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman,
For.
Councillor Core,
For.
Councillor Kozlowski,
For.
Councillor David Lloydall,
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall,
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris,
For.
and Councillor Ridley.
For.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's 24 votes in favour, none against.
Thank you. Right, we'll now move to agenda item 11, Budget and Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2021 to 2022. I'll now ask Councillor Dean Gamble, Chair of PFD, to introduce this report. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the Chair of Policy, Finance and Development Committee, it is my pleasure to present the Council's budget for year 2021-2022. In short, that we have been able to produce a balanced budget for the 30th year on the trot since we took the Council over back in 1991, and I'm pleased to say that we expect to do the same for 22-23. Despite this, the government has once again only announced a single year settlement, which makes it incredibly difficult to budget for the future. Whilst we have set the balanced budget, we are having to look at some of our long-standing values since we've taken council over back in 1991. We've had to increase our garden waste charges, and we are looking at our car park charges and our refuse and recycling weekly collections. But they are not for decisions tonight, they are for decisions in the future. The background to this budget has been one of the most unprecedented conditions. COVID has decimated income to the council and put huge pressures on services, not only continue to provide services without alteration, but to deliver even more services to those who need. The pressure on our finances may not have been as great as the government who promised when COVID started that no authority would be worse off, but they have reneged on that. And as we know, up to November, our income was down £500,000 due to closure of places like our leisure centres and swimming pools, etc. Yet the government has not given us a penny to help. Since November, the council has been working extremely hard to mitigate this £500,000 loss, and we're hoping to only draw down £250,000 from reserves to balance last year's budget, 2020-2021. To be fair, the government has promised to give us over £200,000 in this coming year to help against COVID impact. But as you will see, we have had to estimate potential impacts once again of losing another £500,000 in income to the fact none of us know when our swimming pool and leisure centres, etc. will open. We have to be prudent at this stage, and it's the fairest and safest thing to do. Our reserves are not significant. We have around 1.2 million of available reserves that we can utilise to mitigate risk and use to develop projects. This is stable, but it isn't strong, nor is it very weak, but it is a protection for the future. We have seen our equipment reserve drop from over 3.5 million since 2014-15, and now we are looking at an assessment of 1.54 for this year, a drop of nearly 41%. Over the same period, the council tax requirement collected to balance the budget has increased by 22%, i.e. 800,000 K. At the same time, the council total revenue budget has remained around 6.5 million, meaning that the council has met the funding gaps through improved income generation and efficient and effective working, whilst mitigating continued increases in costs and inflation. And this is some achievement by officers of the council. This budget shows that although we are small, we are nimble, efficient, and can take action that deals with the challenges thrown at us, and we are not afraid to make decisions, unlike other organisations who may be significantly larger, but have not made the decisions for the future. We will not put our council back. I would like to thank all the officers as a whole who have helped put this budget together. It has been extremely difficult, and I'm proud of how they've achieved this. I move the recommendations, but I'd like to add one more recommendation which went with this passed at PFD. So it's been recommendation F. Consultations be held involving all staff, invited participation in shaping the future of the council through putting ideas forward on income generation and providing services differently and cost effectively. I need recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble. Councillor Sharon Morris, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to add another recommendation, but before I go there, I've actually got two items. Do you want me to deal with them one at a time and you call me again, or do you want me to do them both at the same time?
I don't know. Mr. Ball, which is the best way to deal with this, do you think?
Mr. Gill, do you have a comment?
Mr. Gill?
Causing confusion.
Good evening, members. I think it's probably better if both of them are raised together, and then we can see how it pans out from there.
Thank you. Right, so my first item is I'd like to add a further recommendation, which will be recommendation G. And the recommendation is that the details of the car parking and the refuse and recycling service come back to the next full council meeting, or the most efficient council meeting, because I know we might not get both of them back quickly, before anything is implemented. That's item one. And the second one is with regard to item 7.6 of the report. I would like to ask if we can have a report to either the People Committee or PFD on long-term sick within the authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to speak, I don't know which one, but I've got Councillor Broadley. I don't know which one of you is going to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to second Sharon's recommendation, as I feel it would be extremely important that a full and true costing be given to members well before the March meeting, or whichever meeting it comes, to enable us to properly scrutinise and ask any questions, and that they be answered before the meeting takes place. So I would like to second the motion, the recommendation, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kevin Lloydell, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got several observations through the report and some clarifications, if I may. I can go through them one by one, or I don't want to bore people with it, but there's quite a lot.
Go on then. Carry on, Councillor Lloydell. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. I'll go to page 18 of the report. Item 3, just a clarification when it talks about the annual budget book. I'm sure somebody else might mention that. I can't remember ever receiving one, so that's just an observation there for Mike. And then if I go on to page 19, looking at the budget summary, 3.2, you notice there that the government, central government grant is 0. I'm sure that somebody's going to say that beyond further from that point of view. Same page 19, 3.5. I just need clarification of that, all of that paragraph, and what does it mean, especially when we talk about changing legislation that's affected what we're trying to achieve from a budget perspective, plus 30k and above items that are equivalent to an average cost of a member of staff, including on cost. I just need clarification what all that means, basically, if I may. Now I can turn over to page 20, or we can answer those if somebody can answer those first.
Thank you.
If somebody else wants to.
Sorry, Councillor. Who wants to answer Councillor Lloydell, please?
Oh, if I may, Your Worship, I can't remember what his first question is, so I'll go in reverse order. Paragraph 3.5 is basically saying that when there's, as every year, there will be changes in legislation, rules, services we need to provide, and they impact on the budget. They may be inflation, Bank of England central inflation rates. They may be things to do with environmental health and the number of times we have to go and check premises. All those sort of things are unavoidable, and we can't do, we have to deal with them. His comment about the 30k and above, i.e. items that are equivalent to the average cost of a member of staff, including on costs. That's sort of a quantifiable measure that we've always put in there, saying this is, if you think about an average member of staff would cost 30,000 quid. This is, you can see that the interest received that we're not getting is costing 2 and a bit members of staff. If you put that, it's just a quantification term, so you can visualize. Actually, you think, oh, 600,000 quid because of COVID. That's equivalent to 20 members of staff. So it's there just as a visualization tool, which was requested in previous years. You mentioned on 3.2 central government grant 0. That's just reflecting that we don't get the central government grant anymore. Some authorities still do, they're a very small amount, but we don't. And that's not going to come back ever, by all accounts, across all.
Quite clear, Mr. Ryan, thank you.
And what was, I can't remember what the first one was, Councillor Lloydell. I think you mentioned something else.
Just those 3 items, starting off at, the budget book, sorry.
Oh yeah, the budget book. Right, so the budget book is effectively, as you go to other authorities, it is this item and the council tax item amalgamated into one book. So if you look at Charnwood, it's that sort of thing. What we did, and I think Councillor Morris was involved last year, we had a template for the budget book that was meant to be delivered, but unfortunately staffing issues and COVID meant that's not. Mr. Campbell's got that in place, ready for that to go out. And it's a much more detailed, it's something you stick in the public where they can look at it and then go, what does environmental health do? It tells you what environmental health does. It tells you what the cost of service is to the resident. It tells you who to contact.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hines. Appreciate that. Can I continue?
Yes, please, Councillor Lloydell, please do.
Nobody else is coming in. I'll page 20. Again, clarification at the top. Perhaps it's me that's not understanding it. It's the chart which says interest received 70,000. That reflects the amount council can afford to invest. For me, I've been probably not understanding it. When it says interest received 70,000, we've not received 70,000, but that's something to do with investment, is it? Well, I'm confused with the two.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yes, please.
These are the new cost pressures that we've got this year. So last year in the budget, there was £90,000 of investment income budgeted for. We were never able to invest the amount of money to get that £90,000. So we've had to reduce the investment income budget down by £70,000 because we believe we'll get £20,000 from the amount we can safely invest.
Okay, let me carry on then, if I may, Mr. Hines. It's the planning application fees, a reduction in anticipated, which is 59,000. Does that mean that department will operate in a deficit, or are you mitigating that in another way?
If I could ask Mr. Thorpe to come in to explain how that's impacted.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hines. In terms of reduction in planning application fees, this is a result of the fact that the majority of the major planning applications that we were expecting to come in following adoption of the local plan have come in during this current financial year. And those applications bringing significantly more income than the general householder applications, which are, of course, the majority of applications that we get in the council. So we had to reduce the budget expected income for next year by £59,000 to take account of that. But what we have done is that to increasing our pre-application fees. So to some extent, although not to the full extent, they will help to mitigate against that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship. Can I carry on, or is somebody else want to come in?
Yes, if you want to, Councillor Lloydell.
Okay, again on the same chart, long-lasting COVID. Excuse me. It says 600,000 to mitigate against medium-term impact on COVID. On 3.6, it talks about whilst the government has given over 200,000. How does that relate to the 600,000? Or does it mean that we've only got 200,000, so we're £400,000 short?
If I may, Your Worship, it means that the government's given us £200,000, but we're expecting another £600,000 on top of that.
Okay.
So it's just a case of mitigating. And as Councillor Gamble said in his statement, fingers crossed, we'll only scratch that. But in reality, as we found this year, it could be anything really. But that's our prudent measurement of what the COVID will cost us on top of that.
Okay, if I may carry on, Your Worship.
Yes.
3.8, probably a little bit of contradiction in terms where it talks about the aim of the authority is to provide improved levels of service whilst reducing the costs. How we can improve the services if we're reducing the cost? It seems to be a contradiction in terms to a certain extent. That's just a comment. I won't expect you to deliver that, answer that. It's just to provide improved services, but that will come later. Can I carry on, Your Worship?
Yes, please do, yeah.
I think it's already may have been used on page 21, where we look at increasing car parking charge, etc. You're going to ask for a report anyway, look at income over expenditure. I think that's a sensible thing to do. Review of refuse recycling, which is what we said we'd have a look at. But then we looked at sort of down the bottom. It talks about outsourcing, which I obviously don't support. The thing is, for me, is that if I give you an example, when we talk about increased car park, why we're doing that. Lately, this week in the paper, another authority is closing down its toilets. Petitions going around to try to save them. Comment from that authority was that it will save £20,000 each year. The question then is that 20,000 going to be reinvested elsewhere? The answer is no, it's not. It's going to be offset against setting a balanced budget. So therefore, it's not a saving, it's actually a cut in service. I think it's important to remember that. It is. With regards to cost-effective refuse recycling, on page 21, again, another example of outsourcing, which you need to take on board because the evidence is out there. When the county council outsourced their waste transfer depots, OB is being one of them, they then decided to review it and take it back in-house. thus saving £2 million a year. So the county council have wasted £2 million year on year that the taxpayers had to forfeit. So when you talk about outsourcing, it's not necessarily the best way forward. It's not necessarily cost effective. So that's something that we need to be very, very clear on. And if I go over and look at, it talks about gold standard in that particular report. Well, we operate a service that people want. We did a survey in 2018 in our area, had over 200 replies, and most of them, a great majority, over 90%, said we want weekly collections. All my life, I was born in this borough, apart from moving away, we've always had weekly collections. So it's a service, not a gold standard. It's a service that people want. If we're saying we're going to go to weekly, again, as my sample suggests, it's not a cost saving. What it is a service cut. I think it's important to get that out there to people, that because of, and I like the charts and the signs that you produced, I think that's fantastic. Hopefully we'll get a copy of that, because if you think there's a 41% reduction over time in services, I'm sure people out there will understand why we're having to do what we're doing today. I know that's a statement, but it's and it says it's, and the other thing it says it's one of the most expensive. I don't want to be controversial, but I usually am. But when you do it pro rata, when you look at Appendix 1 and look at the cost there on the chart, and then you look at when it says that the refuse that is most expensive, but if you pro rata that with what the trade refuse do, and then look at the cost associated with community and wellbeing, over £1 million, financial resources, over 2 million. When we start looking at singling out services and saying out that they're most expensive, I think we need to look inwards. We have to look inwards to see whether or not there are any savings that can be made in those particular areas as well. You can't not single out other services like the trade and refuge and grounds maintenance and so on, without then looking inwards and saying, have we got it right here? Just an observation, I'll just share that with you because I think that's important. Sorry, Your Worship, I have got more, but I don't want to bore everybody. So if anybody else wants to come in or anybody wants to make a comment, please do so. Because I've taken up a lot of your time, but there are other issues. Sorry, there are other clarifications I need to share with you.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to come in? I think Councillor Charlesworth, were you next to speak?
Mr. Lloydell can finish.
Okay, carry on then, Councillor Lloydell. Mr. Charlesworth, Councillor Charlesworth willing to wait.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think it's alluded to. I'm going through, I've got that many red marks on my, I won't bore you with those. I'll just go down to page 25. Page 25, 76 resources. Again, it's already been alluded to, and I think we need to identify and make sure that our staff, or the staffers that we've got, are incredible in what they've done so far in tackling this the additional work in the pandemic. I think everybody need a medal, really. They do the hard work and dedication. Again, you come back to the trade and refuge people right through. They've carried on working, and they've provided a service all through these difficult times. And I think to be sensitive and to be caring, we need to take on board our staff and their dedication and hard work, and ensure that we're forced down a line which we don't want to go down, but that's why we want to include them in any decision making that we won't move forward with. I'll give it to the rest there, Your Worship, but thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Councillor Charlesworth, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I fully support the recommendation. It's only the right and proper thing to do. We need all the evidence and information before us before we take a a really big decision like that. These are essentially our last two red lines. We've had them a while, and as Councillor Lloydell has said, you know, it's not the gold standard, it's the service that we've delivered over the past few years. My personal view is that we use a little more of reserves to get through. I would need to be really convinced about car parking charges. Maybe a few years ago or in a couple of years' time, it might be more appropriate. Just at this moment in time, I can't see it. Town centre, especially Wigston Town Centre, I can't speak for Oadby or South Wigston, is in a very difficult situation. The shops that are going, the banks that are going, Age UK is now closing down. It's getting pretty dire out there. And I don't know what the Prime Minister is going to say next Monday, whether he lifts restrictions and we get things going again, which would be better for all of us. But I would have thought now's not the time. But give me the evidence and the facts and convince me. But it's right that officers go away, do a proper job on the costings, the evaluation, come back to us. I know there's a bit of work involved, but you make decisions based on facts and evidence, not just because you need to raise some money. That is not acceptable. I mean, some of the spending projects, I find them dubious at best. I mean, the £28,000 for the car park, council car park. I've looked at that car park. I can't see an issue that requires £28,000 on it. The two vehicles at the depot, 60 odd thousand. That's not a professional valuation of what's needed to be done. You only have to read the report to know it wasn't professional. So whether that needs to be done now or not, I'm not so sure. We need people who have the skills to do that, to do it. And I know capacity has always been an issue at this council for things to get done. But over the years, members have been asking for various things to be done. And there's either been a delay or they haven't even took off. That's got to change. If it means more staff, okay. But it's not the amount of staff, it's the ability of staff. And councillors play a big role in helping things along. I'm hoping the new committee structure, if it is accepted, will help things. Proper scrutiny, proper overview, that's what's needed. But as long as the recommendation being put forward by Councillor Morris and seconded by Councillor Broadley is on the sheet and is accepted, I'll be happy to support the MTFS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, just for the record, Vicky Hewitt, People Manager, has now joined the meeting.
Thank you. If it's okay with everybody, I'd like to bring Mr. Hines in now before Councillor Hack and Councillor Bentley, if that's okay. Mr. Hines?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of points on Councillor Lloydell's questions. When he was quite agree with him. The whole idea of the work around refuse and recycling is to find out what is the best service and most cost-effective service for the organisation, not just to outsource for outsourcing sake. So I agree with him thoroughly on that, and that is the work that needs to be done. When you went through the appendices, I need to pull them up. He pointed out that community and wellbeing is £1 million. That's because around £1 million of that is the refuse and recycling service. In finance and resources, £2 million of that it is the statutory services, plus the capital charges and repayments that the council makes, plus the HRA. So there's a lot of areas there that have been looked at, and I will refer back to an earlier statement. Staff are involved in this budget at every level. I think at PFD, Mr. Gill came up with some great examples. There are a lot more examples that have come through, particularly in Mr. Thorpe's area, about working, reducing the cost of delivering the service, but carry on doing it, not spending money on things we don't need. These things happen all the way through. So whether there's some sort of mystique that there's a bubbling pot that we sit around and go, right, that's the budget, we're not going to work out what the actual costs are, we're just going to put a finger in the air and do it, and the staff will do what they're told. That's not the case. This goes all the way through, and the staff, as part of that, they feed into the corporate plan, which is aligned with this budget setting. So they are involved in all the way through. Councillor Charlesworth, I think it's rather disparaging of you, the comments he made about staff's capability. The work around the refuse and recycling team and the depot has been undertaken by professional members of staff. And I think if they were here to listen to this, they'd be very disgruntled and quite upset and demotivated. So I really think political statements are well and good, but attacking and making comments like that is really unacceptable. And I think it's time to take a step back and have a think about what you've just said, because this is a public meeting and staff do listen to it, and staff will watch this and go, I work my socks off, I put my best professional efforts into that, and they're just being thrown out. So on that point, I'm very, very disappointed with that. But back to Councillor Lloydell, his points were spot on. And what we are doing is making sure we're not doing knee-jerk reactions. We are taking the right and proper manner, and we're not just going to raid reserves to balance a budget, because we will go bust. Full stop.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Now, Councillor S. Hack, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments rather than any questions. As a responsible council, I think we should, and we have presented a balanced budget, although we had to make some really tough decisions. And the staff has worked really hard on this budget. So I would like to congratulate everyone who's been working hard on this budget to present us with some options to present a balanced budget for the council going forward. But I would like some reassurance on Councillor Morris's recommendation that the detailed work that's going to be carried out regarding the car parks and the refuse and recycling is going to come back to full council before it's implemented. And the second thing I would like to add to all of this, I know there are some areas mentioned on page 26, 24 and 25, I believe. I would like also some reassurances on those areas that they will be looked at much more robustly going forward in order for us to keep some of those or save some of those red lines if we can in the next couple of years. So yes, please. Thank you again. And yeah, going forward in terms of our investment plans, I think I would like to see a much more robust plan than what we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hack. Councillor Lee Bentley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank Councillor Morris and Councillor Broadley for putting the additional recommendations forward. It was a very disconcerting proposal before that was put forward, and although I still have reservations, I'd just like to discuss the actual proposals for car parking. I'm happy with the refuse and recycling review. That definitely needs to go to consultation, and we need the details about it. But my main concern is the car parking. We have a capital versus revenue issue here. The council expect to gain 150k per year out of car parking. That has to be profit. So we have a certain amount of revenue that has to become before the profit is made. And I've got to be absolutely convinced that that is achievable. We need to use capital to achieve the revenue, because as far as I'm concerned at the moment, our car parking infrastructure is totally inadequate. The availability of ticket machines would need to be increased, because if we're asking people to be charged for all their car parking, we're going to have an awful lot more people using the ticket machines. And I just don't think the availability of them is sufficient at the moment. So I need to see details of what that parking infrastructure would actually be to get the revenue in place compared to the capital that would have to be spent to do that. Even things like shelters around ticket machines. We can't start having queues of people waiting at ticket machines in the rain. And even if in the sunshine, there has to be some form of shelter. I personally travel all around this country, not so much recently because of the pandemic, but normally my job takes me the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. And I see car parks of all sorts of manners, all sorts of different ways of enforcing them, of paying the parking charges, but they're all very efficient. So we need to put that efficiency in place if the council is planning to do this. Regarding enforcement of the parking, again, that comes down to the infrastructure. You've got to take the human element out of this. You've got to put the infrastructure in place to allow it to be automated rather than human-led. Okay, even things like parking ticket machines at the moment, I would consider there's hardly any money in them because not many people do put money in them. But if they're not protected when they're starting to be used an awful lot, if they are used an awful lot, they will become targets. So again, even things like that, payless, cashless machines we needed so that there's less money going into machines and automate it. So I need to see those things coming in to the report that comes back to council so that I can be assured that we're actually going to achieve that if we need to achieve that. So I need to see all the figures. I need to see a proper parking strategy to ensure that the efficiency is there and there's no loss of income. When I see that, I will support it. But at the moment, I have my reservations. So I ask that we make sure that everything is put in place, that we have proper costings, capital versus revenue, so that if you want to put this in place, it's efficient and it provides the money that we need to keep this council operational. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Now, Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to what Councillor Bentley has just raised, following the meeting of PFD when it was agreed that this recommendation would be put through to full council for consideration, my officers have been working extremely hard to come up with a strategy, and that strategy is currently being developed. Members can be assured that they will get all of the detail in a report. It's aimed at the moment that that report will come to you on the 30th of March, and that will give you all of the options comparing the current position and how we see the car park offering developed. I'd just like to make one point about Councillor Bentley and his automation. I appreciate that at PFD, Councillor Bentley suggested that we use ANPR for enforcement because he considered that would take out the human element. Unfortunately, ANPR for use in council-owned car parks is not approved of. It may be used on private car parks, but the Parking Tribunal has come down heavily against those authorities that use ANPR because it considers it to be arbitrary and doesn't have any discretion in it. It will be included in the report for members to consider. It will be a matter for members if they wish to go down that line, but ultimately the test will be if we do use ANPR and we do issue tickets through that system, if the parking tribunals do not uphold them, then it causes a problem. As I've said, there will be a full report, hopefully, going to council on the 30th of March. That's provisional at this date, but if we don't have all the information available, then we won't take it, and we'll take it to the next available meeting to ensure that members have all the information that they require.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Lloydell, please.
Thank you, Worship. Again, page 23, item 661 and beyond, and to page 24 and the paragraphs therein. I think it's important that we've got to get the message across to our residents that that report suggests that all local governments or councils are in the dark with respect to funding. I mean, this has been going back since 2018, year on year. Nobody knows what the funding is going to be, so therefore it hampers you, as any business it would, that it gives the government gives authorities no ability to plan for anything beyond a year. And that can't be right, can it? Businesses are crying out for clarity on when you talk about Brexit, what it is we can do. They want to plan for next year, the year after that. But unfortunately, we're losing that ability to be able to plan for our residents in that way. The conundrum, and of course, it gives organisers the conundrum that we have to second guess and appear that we're not doing anything. Well, we are. We're doing a great deal. I will use the terminology. We're losing our autonomy. We're losing the ability to be able to run our own or create our own destiny, in as much that we're being dictated to how we're going to work, how we're going to live, how we're going to provide services. And people remember when we were in a position of being able to take control of the finances, which audit after audit, it's all there, it's all evidence based. We did have, or have had, always had a financial stability within this council, and the finance people have worked exceptionally hard to achieve that. It is. What the fact of life is that when we were able to control the budget, remember we actually, the first council to be able to reduce our council tax by £10 one year, £5 by another year, and a balanced budget another. That's because we had financial stability to be able to plan in accordance with what services we wanted to provide and what people wanted to provide, and we're able to do that. We can't do that anymore. We can't, because we're being subsumed by a centralist government that is not allowing all authorities to be able to do what they feel is right for their residents at a cost that they can afford. We don't spend, or never have spent in the years I've been doing it, willy-nilly. We've actually controlled it very, very well, as the external audits will verify. It's all evidence-based there. I think it's important that we're forced into a position that we don't want to be in, and we've got to be in a position where it seems though we're doing other people's bidding rather than our own, because the autonomy is not there anymore. I'll just share that with you because I think it's important that people realise that, you know, we're all in this together. We're all passionate. Everybody on this council, all members, I include all members in it, about what we're trying to achieve for our residents, and we're being hamstrung all the way and not being allowed to do that. And I think that's a shame, and it is a big shame that we're being forced down in this line. But again, thank you for listening. But I think I've got to say it. It's coming from the heart.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Broadley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I thank Mr. Gill for his reassuring message? I'm very pleased that members of the council, or officers of the council, sorry, are working on the car parking figures that we desperately need to allow us to make a proper scrutinised decision. But can he also reassure me that it will cover all car parks? We had a discussion at the PFD meeting, and lots of different car parks, South Wigston car parks, Brox Hill, Parklands, all these car parks were discussed. So that in the report that he gives, that it gives a flavour of what car parks we're talking about, not just saying car parks, because we have lots of different car parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can respond to that. The report will contain a list of car parks in detail, which it is proposed that the car parking charges will be amended.
Thank you. Now we have Councillor Dean Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I come back towards the end, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Remind me again. Councillor Bolter, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank Stephen Hines for his report this evening. Not an easy job and lots of difficult things in there. He has pointed out some of the things we can do, and those have been reported back to a later date. It doesn't help with the fact we've only got 1 year settlement from the central government. You know, any business trying to plan 1 year at a time is really struggling. Hope they get their act together. We can actually look forward to some more in the future. But I'm quite sure that we won't be getting any more money from central government. So we've got to raise all the money we can ourselves within the borough. Not just what's been here this evening, but members have got to work with officers to think of ways we can raise extra money. And I urge that we have some grouping or something where officers and members can sit down together, throw ideas about, even the unthinkable, throw them about to see what we can come up with to keep this council solvent and going forward. Okay, in the future, we've got some property development, which is going ahead. That should bring some money in. There's other things we can do. Those councils who are invested in shopping centres have really come unstuck, haven't they? But the government's, you know, tightened up on those sort of things now. I mean, the county budget is struggling. They've got a capital programme of £400 million they can't fund. We don't want to be in that situation. So there's lots of things we can possibly look at doing. Some small things, some bigger things. But let's face it, you know, we've survived for us since 1991 by doing things that people before us didn't do. And we've got to think again. We've got to be more commercial. We've got to think about things. I'm sure, well, I know that Mr. Hines is leaving us, but no doubt before he goes, we can give us some other things that we can think about looking at that will help us in the future. But first of all, I want to thank Mr. Hines for what he's done at the moment. We are going forward. We've got some reports coming back to us in the near future we can take a look of. But one thing I would like to point out is in the papers this evening, the garden waste charge is still down at £40 and it should be £50 and £25 for second bin. So somewhere in these papers, somewhere in here, it's got the wrong figures in. So if that could be looked at, that would be grateful. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I can just comment, the Appendix 4 was updated earlier today. I think Bill receives a paper copy, but it is updated and online at £50.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Lily Kaufman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Because of failure of government not propping up the local authorities and promising them this, that and the other for COVID and then reneging on it, we're penalising our residents. If we get the reports back and we look at the fee for car parking, I really do feel strongly that we should give the residents something back. So can Mr. Gill ensure me that when you do the reports, that we can factor in maybe 1 hour's free parking for our residents in the borough, just to soften the blow? Could Mr. Gill give me some idea that you can factor that in? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, yes, as has been repeatedly said, Councillor Corkman, we will consider all options when we consider the report before it's put to members, and all of those options will be based on a cost-benefit analysis. So you will have the information in front of you, and it'll be a matter for members ultimately to make that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Joshi, please.
Thank you very much for the report, and thank you, Your Worship. My big thing is really, I said this at PFD really, we're politicising issues. Yes, you know, we've had a run of bad years, we've had COVID, but we can't keep blaming COVID on everything. This was highlighted many moons ago, and we had Clive Mason on our books as well, and he'd highlighted that we were going to be in this situation in the near future. So it's up to us to be proactive. And I think the car parking is a big thing. And as an income generator, I think, I'd love to have an Aston Martin, but I can't. We have to make do with what we have at the moment and make the best of it. So we've got traffic wardens around, so utilize that. We've got parking meters, etc. I just think we've got to make the best of what we have with what we have and generate some income somehow. And I think just politicizing it all doesn't help, and blaming central government doesn't help either. I think we've got to look after our borough. That's what I think.
Thank you, Councillor Jossie. Councillor Sharon Morris, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't get an answer on my request for a long-term sick report, or that my extra recommendation was accepted.
Thank you.
Your Worship, if we can come in there,
Please,
we're in a position whereby Councillor Gamble moved the recommendations with an additional recommendation, and that yet has to be seconded. Once that's been seconded, we then have the further motion put by Councillor Morris with regard to the car parking and waste going back to council, and a long-term sickness report, which was seconded by Councillor Broadley. If Councillor Gamble and his seconder, whoever that may be, accepts those two additional recommendations, we can then look at moving to a composite vote on all of the recommendations that are on the paper and the additional ones.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Ridley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Vice Chair of PFD, I second the original recommendations as proposed by Councillor Gamble.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, in that case, Your Worships, could I just interject there? That being the case, are Councillor Gamble and Councillor Ridley happy to accept the recommendations that Councillor Morris put forward, that was seconded by Councillor Broadley, to provide at the moment one composite motion on the table?
Can I interject here? I'm more than happy to accept both the two recommendations by Councillor Morris. Thank you.
Councillor Ridley, are you happy with that?
Yes, I agree. I'm happy to accept those recommendations.
So we'll just do the one set of recommendations moved by Councillor Morris and seconded by Councillor Broadley. But I've got another couple of speakers. Mr. Gamble, did you want to come in again?
Yes, I'd just like to say, I know this has been a very difficult budget to set, and it's the hardest thing we've probably had to do in the last 30 years. I welcome most people, councillors' contributions, but one thing I would really like to say, all the council workers, officers have my full support, and they always will have. I think they do a tremendous job, especially in the last year. It's been very difficult for them, and I'm very proud of what they've achieved in the previous year and the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble. Councillor John Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to speak for long. Putting it simply, Councillor Joshi said we shouldn't politicise the issue. Well, actually, that is the central issue. Councils, quite deliberately by the government, have said that local authorities have got to move to their local residents paying for their services. That has been the government's stated objective for some time. Therefore, putting it simply, whether you like it or not, if you don't like it, you deal with it by voting appropriately at the next election. But from our point of view, the simple fact is we have no option. You can call them cuts. I think Kevin's right. They are effectively cuts. However, the objective of any organisation is to stay in business. If it isn't, then it will make strange decisions. Our objective is to stay and carry on providing services for our council, for our residents. Therefore, putting it simply, I think we have to be careful. The 150,000 we're looking at in this year for the car parks is this year. If that is all we ever raise from the car parks, putting it in very simple terms, we will still go skint, because we need to raise significantly more per year over the time. So it's not just a one-off problem, it's a long-term structural problem, and this is simply the start of resolving this long-term structural problem. Can I suggest we move to the vote?
Thank you, Councillor. As there are no more hands raised, we will move to the vote. So the recommendations have been moved by Councillor S. Morris and seconded by Councillor Linda Broadley. In accordance with Rule 18.3.2 of Part 4 of the Constitution, as required by regulation...
Your Worship, may I interject? The motion was moved by Councillor Dean Gamble, seconded by Councillor Ian Ridley.
I thought we were putting them all together as one.
Yeah, incorporating the motions that were added.
Right.
And for this purpose of this vote, as it's not a council tax raising or precept report, a formal recorded vote is not required, but we'll still go through the motions as a recorded style.
Okay.
That's okay.
So then there are two recommendations. One moved by Councillor Gamble and seconded by Councillor Ridley, and the other one moved by Councillor S. Morris and seconded by Councillor Linda Broadley. So do you still want me to read the part out about the recorded vote, or shall we just go to it?
Just go to the vote, please, Your Worship.
Okay, we'll go to the vote now then, thank you.
Councillor Adams?
Abstain.
Councillor Allen?
For.
Councillor Bentley?
Abstain.
Councillor Bolter?
For.
Councillor Boyce?
For.
Councillor Frank Broadley?
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley?
For.
Councillor Carter?
For.
Councillor Charlesworth?
For.
Councillor Dar?
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton?
For.
Councillor Robert Eaton?
For.
Councillor Gamble?
For.
Councillor Gattaraya?
Councillor.
Abstain.
Was that abstain?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hack?
For.
Councillor Joshi?
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman?
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman?
For.
Councillor Core?
For.
Councillor Kozlowski?
For.
Councillor David Lloydall?
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall?
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris?
For.
And Councillor Ridley.
For.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 12.
Your Worship,
Sorry.
if you allow Mr Tucker just to tally the numbers.
Oh,
and then...
sorry. I'm sorry, Mr Tucker. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself.
So that's 21 votes in favour and 3 abstentions.
Thank you. Agenda item 12, pay policy statement 2021-22. Mrs Court, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report seeks members' approval of the pay policy statement for 21-22. We have a legal requirement to publish a statement each year. Approval is also sought to continue in 21-22 the commitment this council gave in 2013 to pay the real living wage to our lowest paid employees on our scales. The report is self-explanatory, with the appendices giving more detail. As required for transparency purposes, it provides at paragraph 4 of Appendix A, the salary scales of senior officers, and also the pay ratio with these compared to other employee pay rates across the council. Paragraph 5 explains the national schemes for lower paid employees. and it gives the comparison of the rates of the real living wage for 2021, which we are proposing that is accepted to continue to pay, as against those of the national living wage and other schemes. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Broadley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody like to second, please?
I can second that, Your Worship, if you like.
Thank you. I cannot see any hands up to speak. So the recommendations have been moved by Councillor Linda Broadley and seconded by Councillor Kevin Lloydall. Mr. Ball, what sort of vote are we going to go? The same as the last one?
Recorded style vote, Your Worship, Mr.
Okay,
Tucker.
record style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Just a minute.
Sorry, Mr.
Could you repeat that for me? Sorry.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Frank Broadley.
4.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
4.
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Charlesworth.
4.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
4.
Councillor Robert Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Gattaraya.
4.
Councillor Hack.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
4.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Kaur.
4.
Councillor Kozlowski.
4.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
4.
And Councillor Ridley.
4.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's unanimous.
Thank you. We're now moving to backwards to agenda item 9, leader's statement. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As is traditional on this particular council meeting, I always go last because I don't want to steal other people's thunder. And I've no intention of doing so tonight. However, I will, and in fact, I've sent you all a copy of this speech, so you all don't need to listen, or you listen as much as you like. And Samuel, you've got one as well. Let me start by thanking all the staff for the exceptional response to the COVID-19 outbreak. I think our response has been excellent, and I cannot thank our staff enough. Their work, along with many councillors who have also stepped up, has significantly raised the reputation of this council. The council, along with many others, is facing a difficult future with many uncertainties. What I'm going to try and do is lay out a few of the challenges, but as equally some of the long-term positives, which hopefully we can achieve for our residents. Yes, we've been talking about income generation. The council will obviously widen its charging of car park in the borough. It will obviously attempt to make these as pain-free as possible. We will look at the available options whilst ensuring we raise the revenue required. The scheme will be reviewed by members on an annual basis. The council has already changed the cost of the green waste. Dare I say, I still think £50 is a reasonable sum and a good value for money. I said these are unpopular measures, but the council must strive for a financial secure future. A more positive approach by the government would be a significant boost. We've got to control costs. That's important for every council. The council's task is to ensure each service is providing good value for money. The council has come under severe pressure regarding our finances. We have incurred significant pressure on income and expenditure which has risen or fallen according to the COVID challenge. Once again, can I thank the officers for rising to this challenge whilst working hard to minimise additional expenditure. We have got out so much money to resident businesses, which we should only be proud of. Service delivery. As part of this process, a review of waste and recycling will be carried out. Once this is complete, the council will decide on the long-term operation of the service. The important thing is the council will decide. The review will consider all aspects of the service. This is likely to take a few months, and changes will have to reflect the financial situation at the time. Remember, the government is supposed to be giving us far more information about the future and local government financing as we go through this year. Whether it happens or not, we'll have to wait and see. We need to talk about our staff. The Chief Executive's job as paid head of service is to keep under review resources required to meet the functional organisation of this council. This is a continuous process, and the current focus is on the need to increase capacity to deliver services. Clearly, the management structure, the deployment of officers will be reported to council. As a quick aside, it's a shame Mr. Hines is going, because given a couple more years, I suspect we could have achieved significant more within the borough, certainly on the development side. But we have to look at taking this as, with any member of staff leaving, as an opportunity. And whilst I thank Mr. Hines quite sincerely, we now need to look at what we need, not today, but tomorrow. So that is a piece of work which will be undertaken. And of course, council will be involved at some point. We are looking at collaborating and shared services, but the opportunities appear more around resilience than actually cost saving. So I'm not sure that simply sharing things is going to resolve any problems whatsoever. And again, as an aside, in a couple of the councils I've visited as part of working for the LGA, some shared services and certainly sharing management structures can actually make matters worse. Let's be clear, our officers are a valuable asset, and they have often suggested and supported and worked hard to achieve many improvements to our services. And of course we need to support that, and that work will carry on. Not only that, but of course any massive or big or even significant change to our service requires a business case, and it requires the approval of members. So there is a link between officers and members already, and that needs to be strengthened. I need to say a few words about the customer service centre. The idea of moving it to Bell Street was superb at the time. However, we've now come to the point where we're at the end of its lease, and that lease will not be renewed because it's simply an expenditure we cannot afford. Nonetheless, it's been closed for some months, and the actual quality of the work carried out by the customer service technicians has not got worse, it's got better. We've actually achieved an award in that in period, and that has led to other things. So we need to continue to improve our customer service whilst changing the way many of our customers ask for that service. That can be difficult, and it could be that we also need to go out more to help more people. So it's an ongoing channel shift, but nonetheless improving area we need to look at. It's especially important that we continue to build on the recent success of the Customer Service Excellence Award. And we've actually received 88,000 grant from the government about the coronavirus emergency. And that's because we've demonstrated that we can actually get out and actually communicate properly with our residents, and that's important. And we need to build on that, and I'm sure we will. And because we need to continue to build and give our residents the service they deserve. Future sustainable initiatives. Let's look at what else we're doing. we have had an asset register for a long time, and that's been published on the website for a significant length of time. But people are absolutely correct. We do need to bring that to council, and we need to start looking at that. However, we don't have boundless assets, but what we do need to do is focus on getting the best from them. Let me go through some of the positive growth issues that are going to come through. The budget actually has got about £10 million worth of capital spend on the borough, and this will bring in both jobs and housing. There's a good, this will be good for residents and businesses, for the council to bring in both capital and income generation. So it's good for us as well. We'll bring forward the development of the old Oadby pool with an idea of getting the first spade in the ground by 31st of March next year. So we actually want to get that going. Adrian later on will talk to us a bit about the process, and it's not necessarily going to be easy, but we will get there. We have to be positive. We're going to bring forward housing sites on Horseball Lane in South Wixton. We'll redevelop the site in South Wixton to include a community health centre, and that's in partnership with the CCG. We will bring forward the depot as a replacement for Bushlow House. Now, this hopefully at least planning by March of next year. As part of the process, we will check if we could move to Brox Hill. There is a problem. If we move to Brox Hill, that technically is in the middle of the Greenwich. So actually, we may end up having to refuse ourselves planning permission. So that's not a wise thing. But again, Adrian will bring us a little bit more up to date. We'll clearly bring forward plans for Bushlow House. If you sell it, it may not bring in as much value as you would imagine. If we redevelop it, we may well be able to bring in a revenue income, which is what we need from it. So there is work on that. I'm not saying what the outcome will be because I don't know, but there's work, then there's an outcome. We will use council-owned land in the town centres. We have got to bring forward, as per the local plan, housing, and so we need to look in the town centres and Paddock Street. There have been ideas on Sandhurst Street and East Street as well, but these are things we've got to look at positively going forward. And there'll be other opportunities, not least of all, there are private opportunities going on. In Glenparva, there is a new jail. That will, over time, bring forward employment and some income. So that's good. The direction for growth is actually moving forward. That's good. That will, again, bring income. It will also make the town centres more viable. And the issue with the car park is absolutely fine and correct. There is an issue with the car parks today. But the car park charging isn't going to start today. It's going to start in 4 or 5 months' time. When the economy is opening up, when many of the new houses on the direction for growth, certainly in Wigston, are coming on stream, and the houses in Oadby are coming on stream from their direction for growth. So there is only positives. And I've missed something somewhere, but because we need to at some stage look at our housing stock and whether or not we are the best landlord. That's not to say that the quality to our residents should fall, quite the reverse. But there are ways of running things which can put us as a council in the position of the greatest influence, whilst also bringing in a revenue stream. Now that can be done in various ways, but we need to look at it. That's not a decision, that's an area to look at. So overall, we have to achieve a sustainable revenue budget. If that means savings, fine. Those savings then go into reserves. The reserves start to grow, and those reserves can then start feeding back as revenue, not as capital, into our revenue budget. And that's how you make yourself stronger. And that's what we've got to do. And that's by investing in the borough, not by investing in shopping centres in Great Easington in Wales or something ludicrous. So we have got a plan. We need to deliver it. And it's important to acknowledge it's not going to be easy. This is the start. But tonight, I know it's not easy. I know nobody wants to do what we're doing. This is the start which we've got to make so that we can be delivering a positive outcome for our residents in the future. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Anybody want to speak? I have Councillor Hack down to speak. Councillor Hack, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing to do with the leader's statement. I just wanted to put on record, can we record our sincere thank you to Mr. Hines for all his hard work, and I wish him all the very best for his future.
Thank you, Councillor Hack. Does anybody want to ask the leader any questions? I can't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you, Councillor Boyce, thank you. I'm now going to close the meeting.